never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. And even when I don't feel it, you're working. Never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. And even when I don't see it, you're working. And even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. And even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop, 'cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Yes, it is. Thank you, Father. Lord, we just worship you this morning. We just pour out our hearts and we say there is none like you. That you are the way maker. And when things seem at their darkest point, Father, that you are right there and you are making a way. Thank you, Lord. Praise your name. Praise you, Father. Promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Just sing it to him this morning. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Father. Amen. We serve a good, good God. Amen. Amen. Well, you can all be seated. And everyone online, we'll be back in 5 minutes with Dave.
Am I on? I'm up. Thank you for joining us, everyone online. We were having all kinds of fun. There's all kinds of technical things going on. So what if I just fade out at some point, I'm so sorry. But good to have everybody here. Happy Mother's Day. I think today's Mother's Day, right? Happy Mother's Day, and good to have you joining us on this Mother's Day. For our text this morning, we are in Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 through 24. We're continuing in our series in Matthew chapter 6. And I just got to tell you that this text this morning is so cool. But before I read the text, I just want to say something. There's a few more people sitting here this morning. It's so good to have you guys. I had to record a decent amount of talks here with no one here. Man, that is rough. I will say my style is a little cramped because they've asked me to stay kind of right here, so I will do that. But man, it's good to see you guys. Hope everybody's doing well. So Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 through 24 says this. Do not store up treasures here on earth. By the way, just listen to this. And just let it sink into your hearts this morning. Do not store up treasures here on earth where moths eat them and rust destroys them and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven where moths and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. Your eye is like a lamp that provides light to your body. When your eye is healthy, your whole body is filled with light. But when your eye is unhealthy, your whole body is filled with darkness. And if the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness is. No one can serve two masters. For you will hate one and love another. You will be devoted to one and despise another. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. This is one of those texts where even as I read it and I think about it, I'm like, all right, what are you going to say about this? Doesn't it feel like it kind of told us what we need to know, and let's just go home? But I want to give you just what I'm going to call 5 treasure principles from here, because I want to think about what it is that we actually treasure. What is a treasure to us? How does it become a treasure? What does it mean when it becomes a treasure? And how are we supposed to make sense out of this in the context of kingdom living? So the first thing is just that I want to point out is, first of all, for everybody sitting here and for everybody listening online, for everybody that's created in God's image, you are wired to be a treasure hunter. Now, let's just think about, let's back away from that idea for just a minute and think about treasure. And I've thought about it, and I've talked with my family. There was something that happened. There was a fire that happened one time. This is rewinding the clock some years ago. And there was a fire that happened. And we were sitting around the dinner table sometime after that thinking about it. And I said, if there was a fire in this house, what would be the first thing you'd grab and run with? Like, where would you head? And it's interesting to think about. I don't know where I might head for the gun safe. I have a small coin collection that I'll tell you guys about a little later on, one of my treasures. But maybe the thing that you'd first think about, I need to get out of the house, is the thing that is your treasure. Now, here's what I want to say about treasures. Sometimes we look at that and we might think, well, maybe he's saying that we shouldn't have stuff. Jesus is never indicating in this text that stuff is bad. What he's challenging us with is, what stuff? What are the things? What are the ideas? What is it that in your life is not just stuff, it's treasure? So what does he mean by treasure? Treasure to me is something that captures our heart in a way that it's not just another thing in our lives. It's the stuff we dream about. It's the stuff we think about. It's the stuff that we will spend time pursuing. Our energies are directed toward it. We'll spend money to get it. We'll do whatever it takes, but it's something that matters to us on a level that is different than just other things. And that kind of becomes treasure. So when he's writing to us in this text, he says, by the way, don't store up treasure here. We're going to get to why in a little bit. What I want you to think about in this text, though, in this first point, you are made in the image of God, and by definition, that makes you a treasure hunter. There should be things that you pursue. There should be things that matter to you. There should be things that as you look at, you say, that is valuable, and I'll chase that. I'm going to make that part of my life. But then he gives us some guidelines in how we think through that. So, I think even though we're wired to be treasure hunters, I think in this first thing, I want you to think about this. Remember this. Your heart has a really limited capacity. Did you catch that in this text? You can only have one treasure. You can't, he says you can't love things here, treasure them, have them at treasure status, and also have me at treasure status. You can't have the stuff around you, although it's good and he wants you to enjoy the stuff. And by the way, if he's blessed you with money, don't sit here and feel guilty about it. If he's blessed you with stuff, enjoy it. He says he's given us all of this stuff to enjoy, but don't let it somehow creep up in your life to where it becomes treasure status, and now it's captured your imagination, and now it's consuming your time, and now all of life kind of centers around that. Don't let it become that. Because your heart has our hearts are made intentionally to have this limited capacity. You can only have that one treasure. You can only have one thing that really captures your heart well, and that's it. Second idea then is this. Nothing is a treasure until it is treasured by someone. Nothing's a treasure unless somebody says, I'm going to make that a treasure. Another way, we say it this way in our culture. We have this saying, one man's junk is another man's treasure. When we were growing up, when we had kids, and I suppose many of you had kids know what I'm talking about. When our kids were really small, they had something that became a treasure to them. Like I'm talking really small. And they would call it, in the case of our kids, they call it their blankie. They had this little, now was that thing actually worth anything? Dollar value? Was it actually, no, but when it was time to go to sleep and when they were tired and when their emotions were falling apart from fatigue, if the treasure wasn't there, oh, there was problems. Or if you happened to take a vacation and forgot to take it along, you know what I mean. Second thing I want to tell you about to help unpack this idea, nothing is a treasure until it's treasured by someone. We're going to circle back to this at the end of our talk this morning. But I want to tell you about my dad, and then I want to tell you about me. Growing up, my dad, who lived through, he was born in 1933, so he lived during the last of the Great Depression, kind of into the first parts, through the war thing that went on, this World War II, and lived on a farm in Ohio, grew up on a farm in Ohio. He talks about some of how little they had for some years when it got really low, and then it kind of picked up again. And probably as many people in his generation did, or at least some people, when he had a shop. And that shop was just chock full of stuff. And I would go in there and I'm like, what is this stuff? I mean, there's pieces of wood, there's scraps of metal, it wasn't like you walked in and said, oh, that's really cool. It wasn't that so much. It was like, what is this? Ironically, Sean walks into my garage right now and says, why is that on the shelf? Because I treasure it. And I used to say, Dad, why don't we clean out the garage? What's this piece of wood? Well, someday I might need it to make something. Really? Just about a year ago, my dad, who's now 86, my mom's 85, their health got to the point where they sold their house and they moved into a house near my brother so my brother can kind of watch and take care of them, real close to my brother's house. And so all my siblings, I was the only one that didn't make it. All my brothers showed up there and they started going through the treasure cove. You know what they did? They built a big fire. You know how that works. And they hauled stuff out. And then they backed the truck up, and on that truck they threw scrap metal and took it to the scrap yard. And then they backed another truck up. On that truck was just stuff that went to the dump. So now I'm his son. So let me tell you a little my story. One of the things I treasure is... let me just give you a little backdrop to this. When I was a kid growing up, one night I remember this, and it's funny how much I remember about how little I remember about it. We were sitting and it was after dinner, and we were just hanging around the living room, and Dad come out with this jar, and it had coins in it. And he said, "Look at these coins I've collected." And he was collecting, and it wasn't many. And the way I remember, and again, it's funny how much I remember, how little I remember. the little I remember is I have no idea what kind of coins they were. I know they were from either the late 1800s or early 1900s. I don't know if they were Morgans. I don't know if they were silver dollar. I have no idea what they were. But I remember as a little boy watching Dad. And here's what I do remember is how excited he was about his coins. Interestingly enough, it was the only time in my entire life I ever saw those coins. I don't know if to this day he still has them. So when I grew up, guess what I became? I got a small coin collection. It's not really cool coins. It's not anything rare or that special, but I think I got it from watching him and his excitement. So I have a coin here, and in this case, this is a 2018 penny. Is this a treasure? Nah. If I tell you how much are you going to give me for this, that's what makes something a treasure. What are you willing to pay for it? So it's just a coin. Then I have this coin. Now, what's behind the story of this coin is different. See, not only do I have this little fascination with coins, I also love Civil War history. I love going to battlefields. I love going to museums, Civil War stuff. I love reading the books. And one day I had a chance to buy a coin. The date on it was 1865. You know what happened inside of me? I just found the treasure. I was so excited. I bought that coin and I went home. And I tend not to be a particularly dramatic person, but this moment is different because now I have a treasure. And so I had to call a family thing. Everybody gather around. Dad has something to show you. The kids are expecting something cool. I mean, they're all excited. Dad's excited. I'm excited. They gather around. I said, look what I have. It didn't seem like they were catching on, so I had to help them. This coin is from 1865. Sean starts to yawn. So I try to help him. Now, I have one of my kids that really gets into coins as well, but I had to help him. This coin was made the year Lincoln was shot. Dad? What? Who's Lincoln? No, I'm kidding about that part. You know what? By the way, just so you know, I just want to throw this out here. This isn't that coin. Because I thought about who might be here this morning. I really wasn't up to getting mugged in the house of God. So this is not that coin. The other reason this isn't that coin, this morning I went looking for it. I couldn't find it. You know why you got to be careful what you wrap your heart around, what you elevate as a treasure? He says, be real careful. It has a way of disappearing. Who's running my slides? If you can go to the next page. Third idea. Everyone needs a treasure investment strategy, what I'm going to call an investment strategy. What does that look like? Well, what Jesus is talking about here, he's saying, be careful what your treasure is, and be careful what you invest your time, so what captures your heart and all of that. Because there's unwise investments and there's wise investments. Now, I want you to catch that. because he doesn't say there's good and bad investments as much as there's wise and unwise. And what makes one investment, what makes one treasure unwise in comparison to the other one is the idea that one has a way you can lose it. It's temporal. It's temporary. And the way he works that out in this text is simply this way. If your investments are here, if your treasure is stuff here, there's three things that can happen. Well, there's a couple of things. There's the corrosion factor, what I call the corrosion factor. And he says moths can get at it, which is nature's corrosion. Rust can get at it, which is time's corrosion. Because that new pickup that you're driving, you're the middleman between brand new and junkyard. Because time corrodes. And as much as you like that thing and as shiny it is, and you should appreciate it if it's especially nice. But don't let it be a treasure. Because time's going to work at it, and someday that's going to be in the junkyard with all the other stuff. So you have nature's corrosion. What can happen with nature? You have time's corrosion, and then he talks about thieves, humanity's corrosion. Somebody might actually like it more than you, and they might come after it. And then suddenly you've invested that this has been your investment, and it's an unwise investment because it's so temporary. The other part of it, why it's an unwise investment, is the satisfaction you get from it. Because when you do have a lot of stuff, and when it works its way up to not just something God's blessed me with, and let's share it, and it's just part of what He's blessed me with, and I'm willing to share it with others and kind of be out there with it. When it becomes mine, because when it becomes treasure status, I got to protect it. It's up to me to take care of it. The satisfaction part of it is, I got to watch this. I got to be careful that I hang on to this. But the satisfaction factor has another dimension to it. Isn't it really true that when I've taken something to treasure status in my heart, it's never quite enough? Now, here's a little bit of my story with that. When we moved out here, Joanna and I moved out here, she was 5 months pregnant. I had just gone through a kidney surgery in Florida that I thought I had insurance for, and the insurance didn't cover it. It wiped out all my money. And so we moved out here and we were broke. Now, when I say broke, it's not a relative term for us. It was a real idea. And I used to know exactly how much money we had. But I took on a job with a guy, I was hired by a guy in Colorado Springs. And right before Christmas, a day or two before Christmas, we were working with him, and he said, hey, by the way, I'm going to have to lay you guys off. I had a job that we were going to go to right after Christmas, but it has fallen through, and so till some other work comes in, we're not going to have any. I went home. I didn't even tell Joanne about it. Went home, because she's due in February, and this is Christmas. I didn't want to worry her. She's got enough issues. Pregnant women have a lot going on. They don't need to hear what's going on otherwise. I paid all the bills for the next month. I used to remember to the cent how much money we had. We had zero in savings because we depleted our savings account. In checking and cash on hand, the way I remembered, it was either $78 or $87 and some odd change. And I was just laid off. And something inside of me said, if I can ever turn this thing around, I had 5 things I really wanted. Then I got the first thing, and then the second, and then the third, and then the fourth, and then the fifth. Guess what? Do you think it was check, 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 check. I'm good. You know what happened? I had 5 more things I wanted. See, that's what happens when you invest here. There's always something more. So you have the corrosion factor, you have the satisfaction factor. It's never quite enough. There's always something else will fill that list. And then you have the history factor. And I just want to say this about that. And I'll relate this to football. Isn't it true that in the game of football, especially with the quarterback or some of them key positions, last week's hero is next week's nobody? See, that's what happens when you chase stuff here. Another way to say that is last week's success is next week's bankruptcy. It's interesting, Proverbs 23, 4 and 5, and this is just part of those verses, says this: don't weary yourself trying to get rich, for riches can disappear as though they had the wings of a bird. We have this little rhyme, and some of you have heard this. I used to hear this when I was growing up. It's the money talks rhyme. Money talks, I'll not deny. I heard it once. It said goodbye. It's really true, isn't it? Your investment strategy. Here's what I want you to remember about this point. God gave you an eternal heart. Never let that heart be wrapped around temporal things. You can't. Only let your heart get wrapped around eternal things. And if I'm sitting here this morning and say, what's the eternal things that he wants me to wrap my heart around? What did he wrap his heart around? People. What do you need to be wrapping your heart around? It should be this way: treasure people, use money. Too often it's treasure money, use people. So let's go to the fourth one. What we treasure wraps its way around our hearts. I heard this story, and I don't know if this is actually true or if it's more just a parable kind of thing, about these, I'm sure you've heard this, about some thieves that broke into a store, and instead of actually stealing anything, they just changed the price tags. So when everybody come the next day and the store opened, it was like, this thing is the price. When we treasure the wrong things, what actually is happening, and he talks about this in relation to our eye. Did you catch that eye part? Your eye takes in light. Your eye takes in the reality of what's going on. But if your eye can't see, then the only thing it can take in is darkness. And I think what he's challenging us with is, when you look around at your world, is there a reality on value in what you see around you? Like, what really matters? Have the thieves changed the price tag? Because in our world, we value things that have zero value. We chase things that are going to end up in the junkyard. We pursue things. We dream about things that are going to be in the dump. We're just the middleman between brand new and the dump. So I told you a little about how we started when we moved out here. Our life started. We were extremely poor, and then God we got our business going, and we began to accumulate a little money. And at one point, we didn't have much money, but man, we needed a new sofa. It's so funny to even talk about it. It is so funny because now looking back, it's like, why couldn't I see this then? And I wonder what I'm doing this with now in my life. So we need a sofa. So one Saturday, we got it in the truck and we headed for Pueblo. We're buying a new sofa. And we went to a furniture store, and you start to look around, and especially when you show up and you don't have much money. You kind of got a real small budget. You look around, and here's all these nice leather things, and you look at them and say, yeah, that's kind of cool, but I think I'll go over to this part. And what's over here is a completely different kind of furniture, right? I mean, the sofas over here, they don't even make these on the floor level of the factories. These are made in the basement. I mean, no one's going to, and you know that. And you're like, we looked around and like, we loaded up our new sofa and went home. Now tell me if any of you, if you had kids, if you had anything like this happen with anything you bought. And when you get home, what do? You have one of those family meetings, and you gather the kids around, and you say something like this, some version of this. On any chair in the house, you may freely sit. But on this sofa, you may not sit. And on the day that you sit on it, you shall surely die. Did anybody do that? And then one day the fall happened. And on our brand new basement level sofa, there was a stain. What's funny about that story is my kids are really active kids, and it was only a matter of time before they're fighting each other on that sofa, and they're jumping up and down on that sofa, and they're eating on that sofa, and they're spilling stuff on that sofa. Eventually it fell apart, and one day I drug it out, as I call it, to the back 40 and dumped some gas on it because I sure wasn't going to pay a dump to take it. And I threw a match at it, and my treasure, within a few minutes, was reduced to a pile of ashes and a few pieces of scarred metal. What a heck of an investment. It's amazing what we let our hearts wrap around. And what's interesting about that is I walked back into the house that day. This thing that mattered so much to me when we bought it was gone. But you know what I still had? My kids. Let me just think through this, and then we'll get to the last one, and I'll let you go. Jesus says this in this text: whatever your heart gets wrapped around becomes your master. And the idea, if you chase that idea down, it means this at the end of the day. What you wrap your heart around, you begin to serve. He says, you can't serve two? Remember, the capacity of our hearts are so small. They're so big in some ways because we can passionately pursue something well. But it's so small we can't passionately pursue several things well. It's either him or it's stuff. And so, what is your master? If your master is money, think of it this way. If my master's money, what will actually kind of be in my life is I'll always want more. Always want more. How much money is enough? A little more, of course. If my master's security, what will actually define my life is anxiety and fear. It won't be security. It'll be anxiety and fear. And I'll always be wondering, am I really safe? If my master's approval, I'll find myself always be involved in reputation management. How do you guys see me? Do you actually like me? And there's this reputation management thing that goes on. If my master's success, there will be this achievement status that matters so much to me. If my master's power, one of the characteristics that will define me is arrogance. But what if my master was Jesus? You know what defines me? Peace, joy, power, love, contentment, and this freedom in my living that helps me enjoy all of life because I've picked my master well. The last thing I want to leave you with is just this. You are someone's treasure. Remember where we started on point number 2? Nothing is a treasure until it is treasured by someone. Nothing's a treasure. I'm going to just change one word, but I remind you of the verse, and I'm not going to say the whole verse, but I remind you of this verse. For God so treasured the world. Maybe make that just a little more personal. So God so treasured you. Because he found you on the scrap heap of humanity. And he looked at you in there and he said, right there's a treasure. No one else saw you as that. No one saw you as that. And he said, right there's a treasure. And he valued it so much. Treasure matters. He wrapped his heart around you. Treasure matters. You can tell how much treasure matters to a person, how much it engages them, and how much it consumes them by how much they're willing to pay for it. God so treasured you that he gave Jesus. Some of the characteristics when things make treasure status in our life, it's what we think about. It's what we dream about. It's what we plan our schedule around. It's what we shoot our energy toward. It's what we're willing to spend our money on. It's what we throw our resources after. But it's really, at the end of the day, what we like to display and brag about. Again, this is, I gotta say, this is a fake coin. This is not the 1865. You know what happened to me after I bought that coin? It was a treasure. This was so cool to me. It was so cool that when people would come over to eat dinner, I found myself. I'm embarrassed to admit this. Just ask my kids. They were embarrassed as well. It was a family event here. I'd work myself into a conversation of coins, and I'd say, you ought to see what I have. And they're like, dear God, Dad, just please put the frickin' coin away. You know what he's doing with you right now? What did he do with Job? Satan shows up and he says, you ought to see my treasure. Did you see Job? Did you see him? See, he wraps his whole heart around you. Because when you invite Jesus, when you surrender your life to Jesus, when you say, God, I'm a sinner and I accept the payment of Jesus on the cross for me. You enter treasure status and he is so jazzed. His thoughts his thoughts just go toward you. Psalm said if you want to even try to count how many times he thinks of you, go to the seashore and try to count the grains of sand there. And that doesn't even come close to being as many times as he thinks of you. Because you're treasure status. There's another text in the book of Isaiah where he says, I've engraved you on my hand. In our lingo, in our day, what it would actually mean is, I got you tattooed right here. Every time I open my hand, right there's your name. People, we will never treasure what he treasures until we receive how he sees us. You're his treasure. And he's saying, look at my kid. This is such a unique, rare piece. Jerry is so special. Mel is one of a kind. And God knows Dwight, there'll never be another one. And when I start to receive that, what happens in my heart is everything inside me is saying, I'm only going to wrap my heart around the stuff he wraps his heart around. And that's you. And that's the broken world that I get to live in. It'll never be the vehicle I drive. It'll never be the house I live in. It'll never be the clothes I wear. It'll never be the coins I collect. It'll only be him and things of eternal value, and that's people. Do not store up treasure here. Store up treasure in heaven. Because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Wow, Jesus, thank you for pulling us off the scrap pile of humanity and making us a treasure for you. All we can say this morning is, thank you, thank you, thank you, Jesus. We love you, Jesus. Help us to wrap all of our hearts around who you are and what you love. In Jesus' name, amen.